The story of Joshua unfolds during a time of profound hardship for the people of Israel. In the book of Exodus, we learn about the relentless oppression the Israelites faced in Egypt. Exodus 1:14 paints a stark picture of their reality. The Egyptians made their lives bitter with hard labor, forcing them to toil endlessly in brick-making, mortar production, and various tasks in the fields. They were treated ruthlessly, enduring unimaginable suffering. Amidst this backdrop of slavery, a boy was born from the tribe of Ephraim. Initially named Hoshea, his name would later be transformed into Joshua, meaning Yahweh is salvation. This change foreshadowed the significant role he would play in Israel's liberation and conquest. From an early age, Joshua witnessed the anguish of his people and yearned for the freedom promised by God. When Moses finally confronted Pharaoh and led the Exodus, Joshua was among the throng that departed Egypt. The sheer magnitude of this event is captured in Exodus 12:37, which tells us that the Israelites journeyed from Ramesses to Sukkoth, numbering about 600,000 men on foot, not including women and children. We can envision young Joshua walking with his family, marveling at the miraculous events unfolding around him. The crossing of the Red Sea stands out as a pivotal moment in Joshua's life and that of the entire Israelite community. In Exodus 14:21-22, we read how Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the waters back with a strong east wind, creating dry land for the Israelites to cross, with walls of water on either side. This awe-inspiring display of God's power undoubtedly left a lasting impression on the young Joshua, instilling in him the importance of faith during perilous times. As they journeyed through the desert, Joshua had the unique privilege of learning directly under Moses' guidance. The first explicit mention of Joshua in the Bible occurs during the critical battle against the Amalekites in Exodus 17:9. Moses instructed Joshua to select some men and go out to fight the Amalekites while he stood atop a hill with the staff of God raised high. This moment reveals that even as a young man, Joshua was recognized for his leadership abilities and military acumen. The battle against the Amalekites proved to be a profound learning experience for Joshua. Exodus 17:11 tells us that as long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. Whenever he lowered them, the Amalekites gained the upper hand. Joshua courageously led his troops while Moses interceded from the hill. This experience taught Joshua the vital lesson of combining military strategy with unwavering dependence on God, a lesson he would carry with him throughout his life. After their victory over the Amalekites, Joshua's role as Moses' close assistant solidified. This is particularly evident when Moses ascended Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments, as noted in Exodus 24:13. Then Moses set out with Joshua his aide. This moment highlights the trust Moses placed in Joshua and prepares him for future responsibilities. Joshua's loyalty to both Moses and God was evident in all his actions. A touching example of this commitment is found after the episode of the golden calf. While Moses established the tent of meeting outside the camp, Exodus 33:11 tells us, "The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide, Joshua son of Nun, did not leave the tent." This reveals Joshua's intense desire to remain close to the presence of God, demonstrating his spiritual thirst and dedication to the divine calling. Joshua's role as Moses' assistant extended beyond administrative and military duties. He was being spiritually prepared to lead God's people. This spiritual zeal is evident when two men, Eldad and Medad, began prophesying in the camp. Joshua's immediate reaction, as seen in Numbers 11:28, was to urge Moses to stop them, showcasing his deep respect for Moses' spiritual authority and his concern for maintaining order among the people. One of the most critical moments in Joshua's formation occurred when he was selected as one of the 12 spies sent to explore the land of Canaan. Moses carefully chose representatives from each tribe, and among them was Hoshea, son of Nun, from the tribe of Ephraim. At this pivotal moment, Moses renamed Hoshea to Joshua, symbolizing his divine mission and connection to God's promise of salvation for the people. The mission of the spies, detailed in Numbers 13, served as a test of faith and courage. After spending 40 days exploring the land, the spies returned with a report that divided the people. While most were terrified by the inhabitants, Joshua and Caleb maintained their unwavering trust in God, boldly declaring in Numbers 14:7 through 8, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and give it to us." Joshua's steadfastness in this critical moment set him apart, affirming his faith in God's promises. This attitude of faith, however, almost cost Joshua and Caleb their lives, as noted in the same chapter, verse 10, where the assembly discussed stoning them. Yet God intervened, protecting them and affirming the wisdom of their unshakable faith. Consequently, Joshua was one of the few from his generation who received the promise of entering the promised land, as declared in verse 30. "Not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand to make your home, except Caleb son of Jephunneh and Joshua son of Nun." This promise not only rewarded Joshua's faith, but also prepared him for the leadership role he would assume in the future. In the years that followed, as the Israelites wandered in the desert, Joshua continued to learn and grow under Moses' leadership. He witnessed how Moses dealt with the challenges of leading a rebellious people, sought God's guidance in crises, and maintained his integrity amidst trials. Each experience was a valuable lesson, shaping Joshua's character and deepening his understanding of what it meant to lead God's chosen people. Joshua's journey, from being born in slavery to becoming Moses' trusted assistant, was marked by challenges, constant learning, and profound spiritual growth. His unwavering loyalty to God and Moses, courage in adversity, and willingness to remain faithful even when in the minority prepared him for the significant responsibilities ahead. As Moses' time as leader drew to a close, Joshua was being shaped into the man God would use to lead his people into the promised land. As the Israelites approached the borders of Canaan, Joshua found himself on the brink of a new phase in his life. The years of learning, loyalty, and trials were about to bear fruit. The young man born into slavery was now ready to become the leader who would guide his people to the freedom and inheritance promised by God. The stage was set for Joshua to step into his role as God's chosen successor to Moses, a responsibility for which his entire life had prepared him, one that would forever alter the course of Israel's history. As the years of wandering in the desert came to an end, God began preparing Joshua for his new role as the leader of the people of Israel. In Numbers 27:18-19, we find the moment when God instructed Moses about the succession. "So the Lord said to Moses, 'Take Joshua son of Nun, a man in whom is the spirit of leadership, and lay your hand on him. Have him stand before Eleazar the priest and the entire assembly and commission him in their presence.'" This divine choice was no surprise, given Joshua's years of faithful service and his steadfast trust in God. The commissioning ceremony was a solemn and significant moment, marking the beginning of a new era in Israel's history. Following God's instructions, Moses presented Joshua before the entire assembly of Israel. The words of encouragement Moses spoke to Joshua, recorded in Deuteronomy 31:7, deeply resonated. "Be strong and courageous, for you will lead these people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them. and you must divide it among them as their inheritance." These words served not only as a mandate, but also as a promise that God would be with Joshua in his new journey of leadership. The weight of responsibility was immense, yet Joshua knew he would not face it alone. The transition period between Moses' leadership and Joshua's was marked by intense spiritual and practical preparation. Aware that he would not enter the promised land, Moses dedicated himself to imparting the wisdom and knowledge he had accumulated over the years to Joshua. In Deuteronomy 3:28-29, we see Moses receiving instructions from God. "Commission Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, for he will lead this people across and will cause them to inherit the land that you will see." Moses' instructions ranged from practical leadership matters to deep spiritual teachings about faithfully following God's law. Joshua absorbed every word. Fully aware of the magnitude of the task before him, Moses emphasized the importance of leading the people with justice and compassion. In Deuteronomy 31:7-8, he reiterated in front of all Israel, "Be strong and courageous, for you will bring these people into the land that the Lord swore to give their ancestors. You must divide it among them as their inheritance. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." These powerful words of encouragement strengthened Joshua's resolve and prepared his heart for the challenges ahead. The leadership transition was taking place not only in the eyes of the people, but also within Joshua's heart and mind. The encouragement from the people was a crucial part of Joshua's preparation for leadership. He needed to be ready to lead and inspire confidence in the Israelites. In Joshua 1:10-11, we see the new leader assuming his role with authority. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, "Go through the camp and tell the people, 'Get your provisions ready. 3 days from now you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you.'" This command demonstrated Joshua's confidence in God's calling and his readiness to act decisively. The people eagerly acknowledged Joshua's authority, mirroring the respect they had shown Moses. Joshua's spiritual strength came directly from God. At the beginning of the book of Joshua 1:5-7, we find the powerful words of the Lord to Joshua. "No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go." This promise of divine presence and protection was fundamental to Joshua's confidence in his new position. With these words of encouragement and the assurance of God's constant presence, Joshua was ready to face his first significant challenge as a leader, crossing the Jordan River. This event would test not only his leadership, but also demonstrate God's power, confirming to the people that Joshua was indeed the Lord's chosen successor to Moses. Anticipation hung in the air as the Israelite camp prepared for this decisive moment. The crossing of the Jordan River marked a pivotal juncture in Israel's history, signaling their entry into the Promised Land. In Joshua 3:7-8, God spoke to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river." This divine instruction set the stage for a miracle reminiscent of the crossing of the Red Sea, reaffirming God's presence and power with the new generation. Joshua's faith and obedience were paramount at this moment. Following God's commands, he instructed the priests to carry the Ark of the Covenant to the river's edge. In Joshua 3:14-16, we read the account of the miracle. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest, yet as soon as the priests who carried the Ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away. The people crossed over opposite Jericho, not only safely navigating the river, but also witnessing a powerful testimony of God's presence with Joshua and Israel. In Joshua 4:14, we learn that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they revered him all the days of his life, just as they had revered Moses. Thus, Joshua's leadership was confirmed beyond dispute, both in the eyes of the people and the surrounding nations. Following the crossing, Joshua adhered to God's instructions to establish a memorial as a lasting reminder of this miraculous event. In Joshua 4:5-7, he instructed, "Go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, 'What do these stones mean?' tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord when it crossed the Jordan. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever." This memorial of 12 stones, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, served as a tangible witness for future generations. It commemorated not only the miraculous crossing, but also symbolized the unity of the people of Israel and God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises. In verse 24 of the same chapter, Joshua explains the greater purpose of this memorial. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. After the crossing and the establishment of the memorial, Joshua led the people in a crucial spiritual renewal. In Joshua 5:2-3, God commanded him to make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites again. This ceremony symbolized the renewal of the covenant between God and his people. The generation that had come out of Egypt had been circumcised, but those born in the wilderness had not undergone this rite. As they entered the Promised Land, it was time to reaffirm their commitment to God. Following the circumcision, the Israelites celebrated the Passover, marking another significant moment of spiritual renewal. In Joshua 5:10 we read, "On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover." This marked the first Passover celebration in the Promised Land, a moment of profound historical and spiritual significance, commemorating their liberation from Egypt and heralding a new era in their journey. With the miraculous crossing of the Jordan River and the spiritual renewal of the people behind them, Joshua and the Israelites prepared to face their first major challenge in the Promised Land, the conquest of the fortified city of Jericho. Before initiating the siege, however, Joshua had a remarkable encounter that would shape his approach to the imminent battle. In Joshua 5:13-15, we learn about this crucial event. When Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. This supernatural encounter reaffirmed to Joshua that the battle he was about to fight transcended mere military strategy. It was a spiritual war under God's command. With this renewed perspective, Joshua was ready to receive divine instructions on conquering Jericho. The strategy revealed to Joshua was unconventional, to say the least. In Joshua 6:2-5, the Lord instructed him, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have all the people give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the people will go up, every man straight in." This unusual strategy would test the faith and obedience of Joshua and the entire Israelite army. Demonstrating his unwavering faith and leadership ability, Joshua confidently communicated the divine instructions to the people. For 6 days, the Israelite army marched silently around the city, following the Ark of the Covenant, with only the sound of soldiers' footsteps and the priests' trumpets breaking the silence. We can imagine the growing tension inside Jericho's walls as its inhabitants watched this peculiar ritual unfold day after day. On the 7th day, as God commanded, the Israelites marched around the city 7 times. The climax of the battle is described in Joshua 6:20-21. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep and donkeys. The miraculous collapse of Jericho's walls was a powerful demonstration of God's might and a testament to the faith and obedience of Joshua and the Israelites. This victory set a precedent for future conquests, strengthening the confidence of the Israelites in their new leader and, more importantly, in their God. The conquest of Jericho introduced the concept of herem, or total destruction, in Israel's holy wars. In verse 17, Joshua instructed the people, "The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent." This concept of completely dedicating the spoils of war to God, often through total destruction, aimed to prevent the Israelites from being tainted by the idolatry and sinful practices of the conquered peoples. The victory at Jericho marked the beginning of a series of military campaigns that Joshua would lead to conquer the land of Canaan. However, this journey would not be without challenges. The next target for the Israelites was the small city of Ai. Confident after the victory at Jericho, the Israelites underestimated Ai's strength and suffered a humiliating defeat. This setback stemmed from one man's disobedience, Achan, who had kept some of the spoils from Jericho for himself, violating the herem. This incident, described in chapter 7, served as a grave reminder of the importance of complete obedience to God and his serious view of sin within his people. After addressing Achan's sin and restoring the spiritual purity of the camp, Joshua led a successful second attack against Ai. This victory opened the way for the conquest of southern Canaan. In Joshua 8:30-35, we see Joshua leading the people in a significant act of covenant renewal. He built an altar on Mount Ebal, offered sacrifices to the Lord, and read the entire law of Moses to the people. This act demonstrated that even amid military campaigns, Joshua never lost sight of the importance of keeping the people focused on their covenant with God. The conquests in southern Canaan were marked by a series of swift and decisive battles. In chapter 10, we read about a coalition of 5 Amorite kings who joined forces against Gibeon, a city that had made peace with Israel. Honoring the agreement with the Gibeonites, Joshua led a surprise attack against this alliance. It is within this context that one of the most extraordinary events of the conquest occurred, the day the sun and moon stood still. In Joshua 10:12-13 we read, "On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, 'Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Aijalon.' So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar." The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. This miraculous event not only secured Israel's victory, but also dramatically demonstrated God's power over creation and his willingness to intervene on behalf of his people. The Bible emphasizes the uniqueness of this day in verse 14. "There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being." Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. This decisive victory paved the way for the conquest of several cities in southern Canaan, including Makkedah, Libnah, Lachish, Eglon, Hebron, and Debir. With southern Canaan under control, Joshua shifted his focus to the north. In chapter 11, we encounter the northern campaign, which began with a great coalition of Canaanite kings led by Jabin, king of Hazor. This alliance posed a formidable threat, with an army described in verse 4 as numerous as the sand on the seashore, with a large number of horses and chariots. In the face of this impressive threat, the Lord encouraged Joshua in verse 6, "Do not be afraid of them, because by this time tomorrow I will hand all of them slain over to Israel. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots." Joshua's strategy for this campaign was characterized by swift and decisive attacks. He led the Israelite army in a forced march to the waters of Merom, where the Canaanite army was camped, catching them by surprise. The ensuing battle resulted in an overwhelming victory for Israel, with Joshua meticulously following God's instructions to hamstring the horses and burn the enemy's chariots. This tactic not only fulfilled God's command, but also prevented the Israelites from relying on advanced military resources instead of trusting in God. Following this decisive victory, Joshua methodically captured and destroyed the main cities in the north, with Hazor described as the head of all those kingdoms, receiving special attention. In verse 11 we read, "They put everyone in it to the sword, totally destroying them, not sparing anyone that breathed, and he burned Hazor itself." The complete destruction of Hazor served as both a strategic and psychological blow to the Canaanite resistance in the north. The biblical narrative summarizes Joshua's conquests in Joshua 11:16-20. "So Joshua took this entire land, the hill country, all the Negev, the whole region of Goshen, the western foothills, the Arabah, and the mountains of Israel with their foothills. He captured all their kings and struck them down, putting them to death." This comprehensive summary highlights the extent of Joshua's conquests and the fulfillment of God's promises to Israel. Notably, verse 18 tells us, Joshua waged war against all these kings for a long time. This suggests that while the decisive victories were swift and dramatic, the complete process of conquest and consolidation of control over the land was a long-term endeavor, underscoring Joshua's perseverance and determination as a leader. Throughout these campaigns, Joshua employed varied military strategies, adapting to the specific circumstances of each battle. We observe examples of ambushes, such as the attack on Ai, forced marches for surprise assaults, like the battle against the Northern Coalition, and sieges, as witnessed at Jericho. In each case, Joshua demonstrated a blend of tactical skill, inspiring leadership, and above all, a constant reliance on God's guidance and power. Joshua also had to navigate complex diplomatic issues and alliances. The case of the Gibeonites, described in chapter 9, is a notable example. Fearing destruction, the Gibeonites deceived the Israelites into believing they came from a distant land. Joshua and the leaders made a peace treaty with them without consulting the Lord, a decision that later proved problematic. However, even when the truth came to light, Joshua honored the treaty, demonstrating the importance of keeping one's word, even when obtained through deception. This situation illustrates the multifaceted challenges Joshua faced as a leader, balancing military demands with ethical and spiritual considerations. His decision to honor the treaty with the Gibeonites showcased Joshua's integrity and commitment to moral principles, even when faced with difficult circumstances. The northern campaign in Canaan, led by Joshua, was particularly challenging due to the strength and organization of the enemies. The book of Joshua describes the Canaanite armies as numerous and well-equipped with horses and chariots, resources that the Israelites lacked. However, Joshua was not intimidated by this formidable threat. Trusting in God's promises and his accumulated military experience, he led the Israelites to a series of decisive victories. Joshua's strategy of attacking quickly and unexpectedly proved effective against the larger and better-equipped Canaanite armies. His tactic of crippling the horses and burning the enemy's chariots, following God's instructions, not only weakened the Canaanites militarily, but also served as an important lesson for the Israelites about trusting in God rather than advanced military technology. Joshua's conquest of Hazor, as described in chapter 11, marked a pivotal moment in his military campaigns. Hazor was considered the main city in northern Canaan, and its fall dealt a significant blow to Canaanite power in the region. Joshua's decision to completely burn the city, an action he did not take with most other conquered cities, highlights its strategic importance. This act not only fulfilled God's command, but also served to demoralize the remaining enemies and solidify Israelite control over the northern region. With the major battles concluded and most of Canaan under Israelite control, Joshua faced a new challenge: distributing the promised land among the tribes of Israel. This process, detailed in chapters 13 to 21 of the book of Joshua, was complex, requiring wisdom, diplomacy, and a deep sense of justice. In chapter 13:1 we read, "Joshua was now very old, and the Lord said to him, 'You are very old, and there is still very much land to be taken over.'" This passage indicates that although Joshua had led Israel to many victories, there was still work to be done. The distribution of the land was not merely a matter of territorial division, it was a fulfillment of God's promises made to the patriarchs centuries earlier. The process began with a detailed survey of the territory. In chapter 18, 4-5, Joshua instructed, "Appoint 3 men from each tribe. I will send them to make a survey of the land and write a report according to the inheritance of each. Then they will return to me. You are to divide the land into 7 parts." This systematic method of mapping and division demonstrates Joshua's careful and equitable approach to this crucial task. He ensured that each tribe received a portion that matched its size and needs. The land distribution among the tribes was not uniform. Some tribes, like Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, had already received their inheritance east of the Jordan River, as agreed upon with Moses. Others, like Judah and Ephraim, received their portions early in the distribution process. In chapter 14, we see Caleb, Joshua's companion from their spy mission decades earlier, claiming the land that had been promised to him by Moses. Joshua honored this promise, demonstrating his integrity and respect for past commitments. This episode serves as a powerful reminder of God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises, even after many years. An important aspect of the land distribution was the establishment of cities of refuge. In chapter 20, God instructed Joshua to designate special cities where those accused of manslaughter could seek protection until a fair trial. Verses 2 to 3 state, "Tell the Israelites to designate the cities of refuge as I instructed you through Moses, so that anyone who kills a person unintentionally and without malice or forethought may flee there and find protection from the avenger of blood." This provision illustrates God's concern for justice and mercy, establishing a system that protected both the right to life and due legal process. 6 cities of refuge were designated, 3 on each side of the Jordan River. On the west side, Kadesh in Galilee, Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim, and Hebron in Judah were chosen. On the east side, Bezer in the wilderness, Ramoth in Gilead, and Golan in Bashan were appointed. The strategic locations of these cities ensured that anyone in Israel was within reasonable distance of a place of refuge. This system not only protected the innocent from unjust retaliation, but also promoted a culture of justice and forgiveness within Israelite society. The land distribution also included special provisions for the Levites, the priestly tribe. Although they did not receive contiguous territory like the other tribes, the Levites were granted 48 cities scattered throughout Israel, including the 6 cities of refuge. This dispersion ensured that the teaching of God's law and spiritual leadership were accessible to all tribes. In chapter 21:43, we read a powerful summary of this process. "So the Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to give their ancestors, and they took possession of it and settled there." During the process of land distribution, Joshua had to address various conflicts and disputes among the tribes. A notable example is found in chapter 17, where the descendants of Joseph, the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, complained that their portion of land was insufficient. Joshua responded wisely, encouraging them to clear more forest land to expand their territory. This response demonstrates Joshua's ability to motivate the people to be proactive and work hard rather than merely complaining or waiting for easy solutions. Another significant conflict arose when the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh built an altar near the Jordan River, as reported in chapter 22. The other tribes feared this represented an act of rebellion or idolatry and prepared for war. Joshua, displaying his diplomatic skill, sent a delegation to investigate the matter. The situation was peacefully resolved when it was discovered that the altar was merely a memorial and not a site for sacrifice. This episode illustrates the importance of clear communication and seeking the truth before acting rashly. As Joshua grew older and his active leadership came to an end, he gathered all the people of Israel for a final farewell speech. This speech, recorded in chapters 23 and 24 of the book of Joshua, serves as a powerful summary of his leadership and a reminder of Israel's obligations to God. In chapter 23:1, we read, "A long time afterward, when the Lord had given rest to Israel from all their surrounding enemies, and Joshua was old and well advanced in years, Joshua summoned all Israel, its elders, heads, judges, and officers, and said to them, 'I am now old and well advanced in years, and you have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake. For it is the Lord your God who has fought for you.'" In this speech, Joshua reminds the people of all the wonders God has performed for them, from their deliverance from Egypt to the conquest of Canaan. He emphasizes God's faithfulness in fulfilling all his promises and warns the people against the danger of apostasy and mingling with the remaining pagan nations. Joshua exhorts them in chapter 23, verse 11, "Be very careful, therefore, to love the Lord your God." This emphasis on love for God as the foundation of obedience is a central theme in Joshua's final message, echoing Moses' teachings and foreshadowing the messages of the prophets to come. The climax of Joshua's farewell speech occurs at Shechem, where he gathers all the tribes of Israel for a solemn renewal of the covenant with God. This location held special significance, as it was where Abraham built his first altar in the Promised Land centuries earlier. Joshua recounts the nation's history from Abraham's call to the conquest of Canaan, repeatedly emphasizing God's faithfulness and grace. Then in Joshua 24:14-15, he issues his famous challenge to the people. "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." This declaration is one of the most powerful and memorable moments in the entire Bible. Joshua presents the people with a clear and unequivocal choice: serve the true God or follow the false gods of the surrounding nations. The strength of his personal conviction is expressed in the statement, "As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord," serving as an inspiring example of spiritual leadership. Joshua not only led the people militarily, but also challenged them to a deep and personal spiritual commitment. The people's response to Joshua's challenge is equally powerful. In verse 16, they declare, "Far be it from us to forsake the Lord to serve other gods." They reaffirm their commitment to God, acknowledging all he has done for them. However, Joshua does not accept this response lightly. He warns the people about the seriousness of their commitment, reminding them of God's holiness and the consequences of disobedience. Joshua's approach demonstrates his deep understanding of human nature and the tendency of people to make promises they may not keep. After ensuring the sincerity of their commitment, Joshua establishes a formal covenant. In verse 25 we read, "On that day Joshua made a covenant for the people, and there at Shechem he reaffirmed for them decrees and laws." To commemorate this solemn moment, Joshua set up a large stone as a witness to the people's commitment. This stone would serve as a physical and permanent reminder of the promise Israel had made to serve the Lord alone. The book of Joshua concludes with a brief account of Joshua's death and burial. In chapter 24-29, we read, "After these things, Joshua son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. He was buried at Timnath-Serah in the hill country of Ephraim, the land he had received as his inheritance." Verse 31 provides a powerful epitaph for Joshua's life and legacy. Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him and who had experienced everything the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua's lasting impact on the history of Israel is immeasurable. He not only led the people in conquering the Promised Land, fulfilling the promises made by God to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but also set a model of leadership grounded in faith, obedience, and total commitment to God. His life exemplifies the truth that true success comes from obedience to God and trust in his promises, not merely from human strength or strategy. Joshua's story serves as a powerful reminder of God's faithfulness. From his youth as Moses' assistant to his final days as Israel's leader, Joshua witnessed the fulfillment of divine promises. His life is a living testimony to the truth expressed in Joshua 21:45. "Not one of all the Lord's good promises to Israel failed. Everyone was fulfilled." Joshua's legacy continued to influence Israel long after his death. His example of courage, faith, and leadership inspired future generations of Israelite leaders. The conquest of Canaan under his leadership established Israel as a nation in its own land, paving the way for the period of the judges and eventually the establishment of the monarchy. Most importantly, Joshua's emphasis on obedience to God and covenant renewal set a pattern of spiritual faithfulness that echoed throughout Israel's history, often recalled by the prophets in times of national apostasy. As you reflect on Joshua's journey, let us remember his unwavering faith and commitment to God. May we all seek to emulate his example in our own lives, trusting in God's promises and leading with integrity. If you found this story inspiring, please like and share it with your friends and family. Subscribe to Bible Light for Life for more videos. May God bless you, and see you next time.